Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Robyn Bolton. Robyn is the founder and chief navigator at Mile Zero, a consultancy that helps leaders use innovation to confidently and repeatedly grow their revenues. Not a bad thing at all. She previously worked at Innosight, Boston Consulting Group, and Procter & Gamble, where she was on the team that actually launched the Swiffer, which if you don't have one, I don't know how you've managed to survive up until this point. Her work has been featured in Fast Company, Harvard Business Review, the New York Times, NPR's Marketplace, and she's the author of a great new book. I loved this book, Unlocking Innovation, a leader's guide for turning bold ideas into tangible results. Robyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish more people knew that innovation is not an idea problem, it's a leadership problem.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of leaders, the problem really comes down to time, right? Because they like the idea of innovation more than the actual thing, right? They run into what seems to be sort of a perpetual problem, that they're
Yeah.
taking innovation, which is all about long-term thinking, and it's running up against these short-term demands, share prices,
Yep.
quarterly reports. How can leaders innovate under those constraints?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And it's not just long-term thinking and investment and kind of the short-term quarterly results. It's also the incentives and how the leaders are measured. I mean, you think about it as a leader, you have a finite budget and, okay, well, if I spend $1 here on operations and on my current business, I know what I'll get. I know when I'll get it. If I spend it on innovation, I may not get anything. And if I do get something, who knows when I'll get it? And oh, by the way, I'm measured on the ROI of my spend. So like, leaders make completely logical, rational decisions. And that unfortunately is very counter to innovation. Um, so yeah, it's hard. And honestly, what I advise leaders to do is when it comes to innovation, do the opposite of their instincts, which sounds crazy, but it's key.
So I'm the kind of guy that actually goes with my instinct. So, and I think a bunch of leaders out there maybe might do some of the same because that's how they got to
Yeah.
where they are. When is it a good idea to go against
Yes.
argument?
It's following your instincts. I do the same thing, but it's when it gets you to where you are, which is leading a business unit, leading, a brand or whatever that is. That is a world where um, you know more than you don't know, right? Like you kind of know cause and effect. You know, if I spend money here, this is what I'll get. You can anticipate what comes next. And so you have great instincts around that. Innovation is the exact opposite world. You don't know what cause and effect is. You don't know what will happen next. You don't know how competition will respond. You don't know how the market will respond. And so you need to be, instead of, giving answers and solving problems, you need to be finding problems and asking questions. And so when you're in an opposite environment from what you're used to, you need to do the opposite of your instincts.
So one of the parts in the book that I thought was really effective, and this you spend a considerable amount of time on this, is actually how to execute on these big ideas, right? Because having a
Yeah.
big idea, that's nice. Bringing that big idea to market, that's nicer. What are some things that they can do to make their most innovative ideas a reality?
Yeah, there's a couple things they can do, even before they have the big idea. One is just being really honest with themselves around what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do, what risks they're willing to take. Like I said, they're rewarded for the short term. And if as a leader, you're like, you know what, I have to hit my numbers, I have to maximize my bonus, be honest about that. So many leaders say, we're going to disrupt ourselves and we're going to create the next generation. And then what they're willing to do is dramatically different. So first, just be honest with yourself about what you are and aren't willing to do. And then second is be clear about what a big idea is. Again, so many people are like, hey, give us your ideas. We want to hear all your ideas. And then it kind of goes into a black hole. And that really kills a culture of innovation. Instead of saying, we need ideas that help us solve this problem, or we need ideas that will be 100 million in revenue, and kind of just getting clear on like what kind of big idea you're looking for. Innovation thrives in constraints.
Mm. So once you've got these constraints in place and people are thinking along the lines of the problem the way that you are, what are
Mhm.
some ways that leaders can help nurture that process forward? Because I think there might be an initial spark of innovation, maybe some action, early actions around it, but
Yeah.
then it may fizzle. So how do leaders sustain that innovation, especially when it may seem like it's taking a long time to materialize?
Yeah. So first thing, leaders have to be involved in the work of innovation. As a leader, you don't just get to show up to meetings. You have to be, take time to be out there with the team, talking to customers, being part of prototyping. Not in so much that you're in the weeds, but you have to be learning along with your team. The second thing you have to do really as a leader is, be the champion and be the advocate. You have to be out there in the organization with your peers, with your colleagues, advocating for what the team's doing, educating your peers, starting early to say, hey, these are the wins we're getting. These are the results we're getting. Yeah, they don't translate, certainly in year one into revenue and profit, but look at all that we're learning and creating and the value that we've got and how we're sending it out to the rest of the organization. So you really have to be out there as an advocate within the company to give the team the cover that they need to do that long-term work.
So evangelizing the process and
Yes.
being involved to an extent possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Something like 0.002% of
Mhm.
all innovation actually generates over $1 million in revenue. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yes.
It,
So
that's
it's
astounding. It's
it,
astounding.
it's horrifying. I mean, I think so many of us have heard the stat that like 95% of innovations failed. And that's just looking at the innovations that come to market. When you're working in a big company, you're incubating tons of ideas. And so often companies are like, we need that one big idea. It's like, okay, well, if 0.002% of incubated ideas, so ideas that kind of percolate up and survive a brainstorming session, actually get to market, you need a lot more than one big idea. You need hundreds, thousands of big ideas to get to the one that delivers those big results that you need.
How do
Totally.
leaders de-risk innovation so that it can become part of the culture?
Yeah, it really is. It's all about risk mitigation and resource allocation, which sound very, very unsexy compared to like how sexy innovation can look. But that's really what it is. Big companies are all about minimizing risk. They're all about efficiently allocating resources, and innovation is no different. So with innovation, it's taking those little steps. It's running the little experiments. One of my favorite things that I've learned is actually work from Rita McGrath, who's at Columbia, where years ago she wrote about discovery-driven planning, which is essentially the scientific method applied to business. You look at an idea, what are all the assumptions we're making? And then how can we test each individual assumption? Because so many companies, and my experience in P&G is the same, is you just launch it all into test market because that seems like you're going faster. And then what happens is if it fails, you don't know why. You don't know the root cause of the failure. Maybe it just was never a viable idea, or maybe one thing went wrong in PR. But you don't know. So baby out with the bathwater and you go back to ground zero instead of just testing assumptions quickly along the way as a way of de-risking.
Yeah, so smaller experiments, more trials, more learning, ultimately.
Yes. Yep.
Mm.
And ultimately, you do go faster and you get to market faster and results faster, even though, again, the first instinct is like, oh my gosh, this is going to take forever. It's like, well, isn't it better to, fail privately at $100 than publicly at 100 million?
So innovation is a team sport, right? And I'm
Yes.
wondering, when it comes to putting these teams together, how much attention should we give to the team itself? There's a lot of research out there on the strength of diverse teams with diverse
Mhm.
backgrounds and different perspectives. I can see those kind of teams working very well together and creating that spark of innovation.
Yep.
Those teams also can flame out and cannibalize themselves. So what's the formula here? for that?
Yeah. So I wish there was a perfect, clean, clear formula that I could tell you that like A plus B equals $100 billion. Um, it really comes down to diversity in leadership, right? So different people have different levels of comfort at various activities through the innovation process. So, for example, I have a friend who loves brainstorming. I hate brainstorming. So we would make actually a great team because as she brainstorms, I would be able to pick out things and be like, "Oh, and this is what we could do, and this," and so I can build on things once they're there. So you want to be looking for people who have those diverse skills, also the diverse experience. Maybe they've been in the company a long time. Then you want people outside the company. But you're right. There's a friction. There's a tension that occurs when you have the diversity, and that's where the leadership comes in around as a leader kind of making sure that everybody sees the value of everybody else and it doesn't become I'm right, you're wrong. And as a leader, helping people kind of realize when, all right, it's time to diverge and think differently and challenge each other. And now it's time to come together and
Mm.
agree on something so we can move to the next step. And that's really hard to figure out kind of when to hit those pivot points of let's think differently, let's come together.
Yeah, I think whether a leader opts for divergent thinking or more convergent thinking really comes
Hmm.
down to feedback, right? And how the leader
Yes.
messages that and manages that message within the teams. Have there been specific feedback practices or cadences that you've
Mhm.
seen to be particularly effective, specifically within creative environments where the need for speed is quite high, and sometimes the threshold for pain and letting go of ideas is quite low?
Yes, yeah, people fall in love with their ideas. I get it. You pour your heart and soul into it. So within teams that are working on innovation, you can't communicate too often or too clearly. Like it just has to be
Yeah.
constant communication. Now,
Hmm.
for the leaders who are guiding that innovation team, the absolute best practice that I've seen is for a leader to walk in and know that they don't have the answers. They have context, they have perspective, but they don't have the answer. And so again, this is the opposite of the instinct is when a team looks at you and says, "What should we do?" As a leader, like, this is what you should do.
Great.
In this case, it's like, you guys are in this every day. Tell me more. And kind of get into a conversation, ask questions, really try to understand, and then co-develop with the team what the answer is. That feedback is really that curiosity is really critical to giving helpful feedback.
Yeah. So a sense of curiosity, a sense of humility, and ultimately a sense of
Yes.
connection with others.
Yes. Absolutely.
The book is Unlocking Innovation, and the author, and she's unlocked a few really great insights today, is Robyn Bolton. Robyn, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.